I was the only employee, or so I thought about a year ago. I took a temporary night shift as a security guard in a small office building on the edge of town. The job sounded easy. The offices closed at 6 p.m. and my shift started at 11. By the time I arrived, everyone was supposed to be gone. My responsibilities were simple: lock the main entrance, monitor the security cameras, walk through each floor once every hour, and make sure nothing unusual happened. The building had 4 floors. The first night was completely normal. The second night was quiet too, but everything changed during my third shift. At around 2:15 in the morning, I was sitting in the security office watching the camera feeds. 24 cameras covered almost every hallway. Suddenly, one of the motion sensors lit up. 4th floor, hallway C. I looked at the screen. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I assumed the sensor had malfunctioned. It wasn't unusual. A few minutes later, another alert appeared. Same hallway. Again, nothing was visible. I grabbed my flashlight and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was silent. Every office door was locked. I checked each room one by one. Nothing. As I walked back toward the elevator, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, steady. I spun around immediately. The hallway was empty. The sound had stopped. I convinced myself it was probably the old air conditioning system making strange noises. When I returned to the security room, I replayed the camera footage. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I watched myself walking down the hallway. Then something made my heart stop. A second figure briefly appeared behind me. Tall, dressed entirely in black. It followed me for only 2 seconds before disappearing behind a corner. I stared at the screen. I never saw anyone while I was up there. I replayed the clip. The figure was still there. The next morning, I showed the footage to my supervisor. He frowned. Then he checked the building's access log. Only one employee badge had been used that night. Mine. There couldn't have been anyone else inside, he said. I wanted to believe him. The following night, I almost called in sick. Instead, I went back. At around 3 a.m., the motion sensor activated again. 4th floor, same hallway. This time I stayed in the security office and watched the live feed. The hallway remained empty. Then, for less than a second, one camera went black. When the image returned, a chair that had been against the wall was now sitting in the middle of the hallway. I froze. Nobody appeared on the recording. The chair had simply moved. I reviewed the footage frame by frame. There wasn't a single missing second, no glitch, no person, just the chair in one position, then suddenly in another. That was enough for me. I called my supervisor and told him I was leaving the building. The next day, he reviewed every camera himself. Later that afternoon, he called me. His voice sounded different, quieter. He told me the company had decided to replace the entire surveillance system because of technical problems. I asked him if he had seen the figure. There was a long silence. Then he answered, "I think it's better if you don't work nights here anymore." I never went back. A few weeks later, I met another former security guard who had worked in the same building years earlier. Before I could tell him my story, he asked me one question. Did the motion sensor keep going off on the 4th floor? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He already knew. Someone kept ringing. The front desk. A few years ago, I worked the night shift at a small roadside hotel just outside the city. It wasn't a fancy place. Most nights, we only had a handful of guests. After midnight, the lobby was usually silent. Around 2:40 a.m. on my first week, the front desk phone rang. I answered immediately. "Front desk, how can I help you?" No response, only silence. I waited a few seconds before hanging up. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Silence. I checked the caller ID on the hotel system. The call had come from room 214. I looked at the reservation list. Room 214 was empty. In fact, it had been out of service for months because of water damage. Thinking the phone system had a fault, I ignored it. Then it rang again. Room 214. This time I picked up and heard something. Very quiet breathing. Slow, calm. Before I could speak again, the line went dead. My manager had told me never to go upstairs unless it was absolutely necessary. But curiosity got the better of me. I took the master key and walked to the second floor. The hallway was completely empty. When I reached room 214, the door was locked. I listened carefully. Nothing. As I turned to leave, the phone inside the room started ringing. I froze. The room had no electricity. There shouldn't have been any sound coming from inside. I hurried back downstairs. The lobby phone rang before I even reached the desk. Room 214. I answered with shaking hands. This time, a voice whispered only 4 words. "Why did you leave?" The line disconnected. The next morning, I told the manager everything. He didn't laugh. He simply removed the old room phone from the system. Before leaving, he looked at me and quietly said, "You're not the first person who's answered that call." I finished my shift that morning, and I never worked another night there again.